Okay, so this is a video on 10.1. There isn't a lot to learn on 10.1, more of just vocabulary and knowing how to graph. And in 9.1, I kind of mentioned that you were learning how to tell if an equation was linear or not, because eventually we're going to be graphing them and they make a line. So we're getting to that. So 10.1 graphing, there's a few things you have to, a few vocabulary words you have to understand first. This is called a coordinate system, and it can, can't talk and write at the same time, it can also be called an X and a Y plane. Okay, so the Y axes, these are this right here is called an X axis. Okay, so all the X values are along here. Then this right here is called the Y axis, and what it's referring to is the line. Okay, and then in the center is called the origin. So along in the center, that is the point 0, 0. So if I just look at the x-axis, the one that runs left and right, going to the right, those would be positive numbers. And going to the left, those would be negative numbers, just like a regular number line. So always on a number line, negative numbers go to the left, positive numbers go to the right. 0 is in the center. I'm not going to write it in there because it's getting too squishy. And then if I look at the, and I'm going to change colors for this, if I look at the y axis, the one that runs up and down, the positive numbers go up. And when I'm writing these numbers, I'm looking at the space where it crosses. Okay, and the negative numbers go down, so -2, -3. So when we look at these coordinate systems, the way we plot points on there is we plot what's called ordered pairs. So if I use the number like 3, 4, this is called an ordered pair. And you can look in the book if you want to on all this stuff too. The first number always represents an X, and the second number always represents a Y. The way I remember that is it's alphabetical. If you start saying A, B, C, D, E, F, G, X comes before Y, so it always goes X, then Y. So it always runs right, left, then up, down. It's a good habit to get in that habit of going left, right, then up, down. So if I look at the X-axis, if I follow along the X-axis here and I start at 0, and I go and I start counting all the way over, 3 is right here. I'm going to erase that so that there's not a line on there. Okay, and then if I look at the Y-axis, 4 is right there. So like if you've ever played Battleship, the ordered pair is where these two meet. Okay, and let me erase this stuff because I don't want lines all over on there. So the ordered pair 3, 4 is a spot right here at this crisscross. So this is the ordered pair 3, 4. If you got the 3 and the 4 mixed up and you thought it went Y and then X, then it would then you'd be in a different spot. You'd be right here, which then it would be wrong. So you want to make sure that you get them in the right order. This corner, see how the coordinate system breaks it into 4 pieces? This corner right here, that's called quadrant 1. They have names for these. So quadrant, hopefully I'm spelling this one right. And they always use Roman numerals. And well, I tell you that and then I don't. They always use Roman numerals for this. Not sure why. And then to name the quadrants, it's always counterclockwise. So the opposite of what a clock goes. So quadrant 2 then is over here. Quadrant 2. This is quadrant 3. I'm just going to put quad, if I can actually even spell that. And then this square over here is quadrant 4. So if I was going to graph a point in quadrant 2, the ordered pair, in order to get to quadrant 2, I would have to go, starting from the origin, I'd have to go left, and that's on the x-axis in the negatives, and then I would have to go up, and that's the y-axis on the positives. So a number, like maybe if I just randomly picked a point right here, that ordered pair, if I look at the x, I went over -6, so my x is -6, and then I went up 5, so my y is 5. So all the ordered pairs in quadrant 2, the first one will always be negative because you always go backwards from the origin and then up. In quadrant 1, those ordered pairs will always be both positive. If I randomly pick a point in quadrant 3, then again I start from the origin and I always go x first. So if I start counting the x's, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that means I went backwards 7, so that's -7, and down 2, let me do this, backwards 7, and down 2, so that's a -2. All the points in quadrant 3 will always both be negative. And then quadrant 4, if I randomly pick a point here, that would be 3 on the x and -2 on the y. They will always, the first one will always be positive, second one will always be negative. Now you don't always have to have points that are in a quadrant. Points can land on an axis. This is getting really messy. Sorry about that. I'll use a different color. So like the point right here, this point doesn't lie in any quadrant. So you might be asked, what quadrant does the point 4, 0 lie in? You say no quadrant. It lies on the x-axis. Notice that the first number is a 4 because I went, remember I'm going right and left first. I ran down the x-axis 4, but I didn't go anywhere on the y-axis. I didn't go up or down, so that's why the second number is a 0. So likewise, like let's say if I put a point here on the y-axis, I didn't go anywhere on the x, so that's 0, but I ran down 5 on the y, so that point is 0, -5. Ordered pairs always have parentheses around them and a comma between them. On the final exam, if they ask to give an ordered pair, if you don't put your answer in ordered pair, they will mark it down. They won't take that point. And so you want to make sure that you always give points in ordered pairs in with parentheses around them with a comma in between the two. Watch your positives and negatives. As you're doing the assignment, see if you're always going in the wrong quadrant. If so, then try and get that straight in your head. Which quadrant am I in? Do I know I'm going left to right first, then up and down? So it always goes X and then Y. They will also have problems where you need to make a graph. From a table. And that's why you needed to know what those ordered pairs were. So if I gave you an X and Y table, and an X and Y table can look like this. It can also look like this. Okay, it doesn't matter. But if I gave you a table and I said, here's the values. And I said, graph those values. Sorry, I can't put an X and Y axes into this program. Kind of cheap the way I'm doing it, but. And so I could graph those. So the first ordered pair is right here. So if I wrote that in an ordered pair, I'll give myself more room, it would look like this. The X is first, and then the Y. And maybe for a while, if you keep forgetting that, maybe force yourself to label it XY. So this is my X, and this is my Y. A lot of times they're labeled for you, but if they're not, you're going to have to think of a way to remember which is which. because that's usually what people get messed up on. I always think I exit left or right, and so my X goes left and right. Some people remember it that the Y is the long letter, so it's the up and down because it's more of a vertical letter. Remember it whatever way works for you. So if I'm going to graph this one, I'm going to go backwards 2. Whoops. Whoa. Hold on. Backwards 2 and down 6. Okay, so I graphed that one. The next one is 0, 0. So that's at the origin. Remember, you got to learn those vocab words. The next one's 1, 3. So over 1 and up 3. And then 3, 9. And then if I asked you to connect those points, then that, and I don't have a ruler, I can't stick a ruler on here. You need to use a ruler. Everything you work out for me, all of your lines must be made with a ruler. Okay, and lines go on forever, so you always put arrows at the end. Notice that my graph, when I graphed, my line went all the way through the X and Y quadrants, all the quadrants, 1, 2, or I guess just 1 and 3, but it goes all the way through. So when you graph for me, and one of the things why I'm having you send me worksheets or why I'm having you send me quizzes is so that I can see how you're showing your work. If you do it all on the computer, there are people who won't show any work at all, and then they're surprised when they get to the final and they have to show work, and you don't get credit if you don't show work, and then they don't know how to show it, and so they lose points, and then they don't pass the final, which means they don't pass the class. So make sure that one of the things I'm doing here is modeling how to show your work. Okay, not all graphs that they're going to ask you to graph are going to be straight lines, but this one was. Then they're going to ask you to read graphs or interpret graphs. Okay, and I don't know how to insert a graph into here without inserting the whole page, so you're going to have to bear with me on this. So if this was my graph, and I should tell you something about the graph first. This part right here, a lot of times we'll do a little squiggly. If we don't want to start at 0, we want to jump to a certain number. It's not okay on graphs to, if you're going by 200s, then all of a sudden to jump and go to 1,000. So it's, you can notice that between 1,000 and 2,000 I was going by 200, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So each mark was 200, but that doesn't make sense for the distance from 1,000 to 0 at the bottom here. So that little squiggly means that there's a break in the graph. Okay, so if this was the years and this was my monthly salary, you can see a trend start to happen. Okay, and if I connect these, it's easier to see a trend. Not that that exactly happened in those years, not like my income steadily rose in 1 year. That's not really how an income would look. But if I wanted to just kind of look at the trend, I could connect it to kind of just see in general. They'll ask you comments about the trend. So like this trend, or the line is indicating rate. So one of the things you could say if they asked you about this graph is you could say that you can see that my income was increasing, but then it took a drop over a couple of years. And maybe I went back to college or something. Okay, then all of a sudden it increased at a greater rate. And you can see it continuing to increase. They might ask you, estimate what my income might be in 2020. And so you kind of have to just pretend like that continues and say, oh, well, it should be about $5,000 or somewhere close to there. Okay, so you can estimate or extend out. They can also ask you about changes. So let me take the line away. They might ask you, what was the change in income from the year 2004 to 2006. Well, 2004 to 2006 is right there. So you would say the change in income was $600 because from here to here you can see that each one of the little marks was 200 because you can count 200, 4, 6, 8,000. So then my change in income was a drop of, what did I say, $600. Okay, you might want to look at the example that they give you in the textbook too. On page 52, they talk about, example number 5, they talk about analyzing graphs. And so just a good idea to get a couple other examples in there. And that's about it for 10-1. That's about all you needed to know.